As the days passed, Janet found herself caught between a web of lies she hadn't spun but was now trapped in. The grand mansion, once a symbol of everything she'd never have, now felt more like a gilded cage. But every time she looked into Victor's eyes, those deep, blind eyes that never judged her, she felt a pull she couldn't ignore. Was it kindness? Or was it the first taste of something she'd never thought she'd deserve, love? She didn't know, but the more she tried to bury the truth, the louder it screamed inside her heart. But that was the least of her worries. Because Chief Emmanuel had seen through her disguise. He knew she wasn't Stella, and he wasn't going to let it slide. In the silence of the mansion that night, a new plan began to form in his mind, one that would change everything for Janet, whether she was ready or not. That evening, after dinner, the soft hum of the mansion felt like a distant echo in the background. Janet stood by the window of her room, staring out at the garden, her hands clasped tightly around the balcony railing. The moonlight bathed the courtyard in a silver glow, but in her heart, there was no light. Only shadows of guilt and uncertainty. As much as she tried to ignore the truth, it gnawed at her, the lie she was living, the betrayal she had unknowingly accepted. She could no longer stand the silence between her and Victor. She turned, looking for him in the doorway. He had entered quietly, as he always did, but his presence felt different tonight. There was something in the air, something heavy with understanding. "Victor," she started, her voice trembling despite her attempt to steady it. "I need to tell you something." Victor paused, his cane tapping the floor as he stepped forward, his posture calm and assured. "What is it, Janet?" His voice was soft but laced with something else, an unspoken question. Janet looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm not Stella. I never was. I don't even know her, Victor. I was forced into this, into marrying you in her place. I never wanted this. I never wanted to deceive you. Victor's hand gently rested on hers, stopping her from speaking any further. She looked up, startled, and for the first time, she saw something in his face that made her heart stop understanding. No anger. No accusation. "I know," he said quietly. Janet blinked, her throat tight. "What? How?" He smiled faintly, his expression both kind and knowing. "My father told me." Her eyes widened in disbelief. Victor nodded, his smile softening. "He knew you weren't Stella. He's been watching you carefully, just like I have." Janet's heart raced. "But, why didn't you say anything?" Victor leaned closer, his gaze steady. "My father is a man of patience. He believes that some truths reveal themselves over time. And as for me," he hesitated, taking a breath. "I wasn't blind, Janet. I could see the way you moved, the way you carried yourself. You were different from her, more genuine. My father trusted me to let things unfold." Janet's breath caught in her chest, and for a long moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of their shared understanding hanging between them. Victor's fingers lightly brushed against hers, sending a warmth that spread through her entire being. "I've known all along, Janet," he said softly, his voice tender. "I've felt the truth in the way you looked at me, the way you spoke. It wasn't just the silence of your eyes, it was the honesty in your heart that spoke louder than any lie." Her eyes welled up with emotion, the truth she had hidden for so long finally pouring out in the safety of his presence. "I didn't know what to do, Victor," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I was just trying to survive. I didn't think anyone would ever see me for who I really am." Victor gently cupped her face, his fingers brushing away the tear that slipped down her cheek. "You didn't have to hide from me, Janet. You never did. And you don't need to anymore." His words, filled with such tenderness, melted the walls she had built around her heart. In that moment, the weight of the lie didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the honesty in their connection, the understanding that had grown between them despite the deception. "Victor," Janet breathed, her voice a whisper of hope, Do you care for me?" Victor smiled softly, his eyes warm. "I do, Janet. More than you know." And with that, something between them shifted. In the midst of a marriage built on falsehoods, love had somehow managed to find its way through the cracks. Janet stepped closer to him, her heart beating in rhythm with his. For the first time since stepping into this strange new world, She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, standing in front of the man who saw her, not as a lie, but as a person. With a deep breath, she reached out, her fingers tracing the outline of his jaw. "I want to be with you, Victor," she said, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "No more lies. No more pretending." Victor's hand slid gently around her waist, pulling her closer. "And I want to be with you, Janet. No matter what has happened, no matter what lies have been told, I see you. I see us." They stood there for a moment, their hearts aligned, the quiet of the mansion enveloping them. And for the first time, Janet didn't feel like a stranger in a foreign world. She felt seen. She felt loved. The truth had come to light, and with it, the possibility of something real. And as they stood together, hands entwined, the lie that had bound them now seemed a distant memory, swept away by the power of a love that had been waiting to be discovered. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the mansion as Janet walked down the grand staircase, her steps light and purposeful. The days of silence, the days of hiding, were behind her. She was no longer the girl who had been thrust into a marriage built on deceit. She was Janet, free, empowered, and more certain of herself than she had ever been. Victor stood waiting at the foot of the stairs, a soft smile playing on his lips. His presence was a constant comfort, a reminder that love had found its way into their lives despite the lies that had once bound them. As she reached the bottom of the staircase, he stepped forward, taking her hand in his, a silent affirmation of their connection. Today wasn't just another day. Today, it was time to face the truth. Time for the world to see the woman she had become. Back at Mr. Jack's house, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A lavish party was being thrown in honor of Janet's marriage, but there was no joy in the air, only smug satisfaction. Mr. Jack and Stella had basked in the wealth they thought they had secured through their scheme. Stella, draped in a new, expensive dress and adorned in designer jewelry, looked the part of the woman who had everything. Or so she thought. Chief Emmanuel had quietly slipped a thick envelope of cash into Mr. Jack's hands, instructing him to organize a grand celebration in Stella's name. Mr. Jack smiled, bowed, and assured the chief that everything would be perfect, yet, the moment Emmanuel turned away, he pretended the whole exchange had never happened. To everyone else he swore ignorance. In truth, the deceit was part of a larger scheme. Chief Emmanuel had chosen this very day to announce that he would bless a new marriage between his son and Janet, a union meant to erase old rumors and silence spiteful tongues in the village. He wanted the drums loud, the lights bright, and the witnesses plentiful so no one could claim they heard it secondhand. By nightfall the entire community would know, Janet was to become part of the family officially, undeniably. Mr. Jack, feeling entirely too clever, spent the chief's money lavishly. Colorful canopies stretched across the courtyard, steaming pots of pepper soup lined trestle tables, and dancers rehearsed beneath flickering lanterns. As the chief's convoy rolled through the gates, Jack clasped his hands behind his back, certain his facade was still intact. He believed the guests saw only a diligent steward, not a man pocketing secrets or profits. But beneath the music and laughter, tension hummed like a taut drumskin. One wrong word, one stray rumor, and the entire celebration could explode, exposing Jack's lies and turning the chief's carefully choreographed announcement into chaos. Chief Emmanuel's white SUV rolled through the gate. Music and drums filled the yard while people moved aside to welcome him. Victor, his blind son, stepped out first. He wore dark glasses and held a slim cane, but it was his father's arm that really guided him. He listened to the music and the talking around him to understand where he was. Next came Janet, and everyone stared. She had put on some weight and now looked healthy and full of life. A deep red gown with shining gold threads hugged her new curves. Coral beads hung around her neck and wrists. Most of all, her smile was bright and easy. Janet walked over and gently slipped her hand through Victor's arm. She spoke softly. "Careful, Victor. The ground is flat here." Victor smiled back. He could not see her face, but he could feel her happy spirit. The celebration officially began as the vibrant sounds of drummers echoed through the yard, and guests filled the courtyard, their faces illuminated by lanterns swaying in the evening breeze. The air was thick with the scent of grilled meat, spicy pepper soup, and the sweet, intoxicating fragrance of jollof rice. The music was lively, and the dancers' rhythmic movements brought energy to the gathering. It was a celebration, yes, but one that held the weight of hidden truths, unspoken emotions, and a revelation that would change everything. Stella, standing near the back of the crowd, couldn't help but stare in disbelief. She had never imagined this moment. Janet, standing at the center of everything, glowing in her deep red gown, a stark contrast to the shy, tired girl who had first arrived at the mansion just months ago. Stella, in her expensive dress, with her designer jewelry, looked out of place in comparison to Janet's quiet elegance. How could this have happened? Stella wondered. How could Janet, an orphan with no name, no status, be so transformed? And how had she managed to secure such a place in the Emmanuel family, while Stella, the one originally promised to marry Victor, was nothing more than a bystander now? The whispers among the guests reached her ears, their confusion and murmurs mirroring her own. They, too, couldn't quite understand the situation. They had been told one story, but now, as they saw Janet holding Victor's arm, they were beginning to piece together the truth. But no one dared to speak too loudly until Chief Emmanuel stood up, his commanding presence silencing the crowd. Chief Emmanuel's voice, deep and authoritative, rang out, and all eyes turned to him. The music quieted, and the dancers slowed, as the chief gestured for silence. "I'm sure many of you have questions," he began, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "And I am here to answer them. What you may not know is that this day, this celebration, is not just about a marriage. It is about the truth, a truth that has been hidden for far too long." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "When I came to Mr. Jack's house, I came to ask for his daughter, Stella, in marriage to my son, Victor. We spoke of union, we spoke of family, and we spoke of wealth. But what I did not know was that Mr. Jack had a different plan, a plan to deceive us all." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and murmurs began to stir. Chief Emmanuel turned his gaze to Mr. Jack, who stood frozen, his face flushed with fear, trying to appear calm despite the growing tension. Mr. Jack felt he could play on my intellectual blindness to the true nature of his intentions. He thought he could trick me. But as you can see, the truth has a way of coming to light. He then looked directly at Janet, his expression softening. "The woman standing beside my son today, the one you all know as the bride, is not Stella. She is Janet, the daughter of his late wife." Mr. Jack thought he could switch them, thinking I would not notice. But we saw the truth the moment we stepped into that house. Gasps and whispers filled the air, and the guests' eyes darted between Mr. Jack, who seemed to shrink under the weight of his deception, and Janet, whose face remained calm, though her heart was racing. "But why?" one guest whispered. "Why would they switch them?" Chief Emmanuel raised his hand for silence, and the crowd stilled. "It is clear now. Mr. Jack cared only for wealth, for his own advancement. He thought marrying his daughter to my son would bring him riches, but instead, he has brought dishonor upon himself." His gaze sharpened, and his voice grew firm. "But we are not here to punish him. We are here to move forward together, as a family." The crowd fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. Everyone was still trying to process what had been revealed, but Chief Emmanuel wasn't done. He turned to Janet, his voice softening with sincerity. "Janet, I want you to know that my son and I have come to appreciate you, not just for the woman you are, but for the strength you've shown, even when the world seemed to conspire against you. You have been a beacon of kindness and sincerity, and it is for that reason that I ask you now." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "Do you want to keep being with my son? Do you want to be his wife, not because of a lie, but because of who you are?" Janet's heart swelled with emotion. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment she had feared her entire life, where everything would either fall apart or come together. But for the first time, she felt free. No more lies. No more pretending. Victor, standing beside her, reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. She turned to him, and in his blind eyes, she saw nothing but warmth and understanding. For the first time, it was as if everything made sense. The fear she had felt since this whole journey began melted away in that one simple touch. Janet began, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want to stay with him. I want to be with Victor, for who he is, not because of anything else. This is my choice. I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be his wife, not because of what was forced upon me, but because of the love that has grown between us. A sense of relief washed over the gathered crowd, and though the air was still thick with tension, there was an undeniable shift. Chief Emmanuel nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. And with that, he said, his voice filled with pride, we have our answer. Janet has chosen, and so has my son. This marriage will stand on truth, on love, and on the future we will build together. The crowd erupted into applause, and Janet felt a weight lift from her chest. For the first time, she wasn't just the orphan who had been used as a pawn. She was Janet, a woman who had made her own choice, who had found a place in a family that saw her for who she was. Victor stepped closer to her, his hand gently squeezing hers, and she smiled a real, genuine smile. And so, amid the celebrations, amid the music and dancing, Janet and Victor stood together, their future now built on truth, love, and a new beginning. Years later, Stella remained in her father's house, and no suitors had come for her. The once proud woman who had strutted around in designer clothes and sparkling jewelry now spent her days in silence, her beauty faded by the bitterness that had taken root in her heart. The wealth that Mr. Jack had believed would buy them happiness had only brought misery. The house, once full of excitement and promises, now felt empty, suffocated by the weight of unspoken regrets. Stella often found herself staring out of the window, watching the world go by. The lively chatter from the market down the road, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the sound of horse-drawn carts passing, all of it felt like a reminder of the life she had imagined for herself but had never fully embraced. She had watched Janet flourish in her new life, surrounded by love and respect, while Stella's world had shrunk to the walls of her father's house. Her father, once so eager to see her married to Victor for the riches and status it would bring, had become a mere shadow of the man he used to be. The money that had come from the marriage, money that he had eagerly pocketed, had not filled the emptiness in his soul. It hadn't fixed the strained relationship he had with his daughter, nor had it provided the happiness they had been promised. In her quiet moments, Stella would think about how it all went wrong. How she had pushed Janet into the position of being a pawn in her own game of survival. She had always believed that she deserved the best, that she was entitled to a life of luxury and admiration. But now, in the stillness of the house, she realized that her arrogance had cost her everything. She had never truly cared for Victor, not the way Janet did. At first, she had been repulsed by the thought of being with a blind man, but now she wondered what might have happened had she embraced him for who he truly was. Victor had been patient and understanding, qualities she had never given him credit for. Instead, she had thrown those chances away, blinded by her own greed and selfishness. As for suitors, no one came. The wealth that had once made her the most desirable woman in the village no longer had the same effect. People had seen her for what she was, a woman who had been willing to deceive her way into a marriage and who had failed to understand the value of love and integrity. The whispers that once followed her like an aura of power now spoke of her in terms of shame, regret, and lost opportunities. One afternoon, as she sat at the dining table, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of a teacup, her father entered the room, his face drawn and weary. He hadn't aged well, stress had taken its toll on him. The signs of his manipulations, his attempts to control the lives of others, had not left him unscathed. "Stella," he began, his voice soft, almost apologetic, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we moved on from all of this. From the lies. From the past." She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" He sighed and sat down across from her. "The money is gone, the fame has faded, and you've been here, waiting for something that isn't coming." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I know you were hurt by the way things turned out, but maybe it's time to look at things differently. Maybe it's time to stop blaming Janet and see the truth for what it is." Stella's chest tightened at his words. "Are you saying I should accept that everything was my fault? That I was the one who ruined everything?" Her father's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "No, I'm not saying that. But you need to stop waiting for the past to give you back what you lost. It's gone, Stella. And you need to find your own way forward. I've already lost everything. Don't let this house be the place where you lose yourself too." Stella's mind raced. Was he right? Had she spent all these years, stewing in regret, instead of building her own future? Was it too late to change? She had seen Janet's transformation, seen how she had grown into someone strong, loved, and respected, despite the circumstances that had bound her. Janet had chosen to live with honesty and integrity, and that had earned her a life of peace. Stella had been offered the same opportunities, but she had closed her eyes to them, too focused on the surface, on what was easy, what was material. Now, she realized that everything she had chased was slipping through her fingers like sand. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She was not the same girl who had once thrown tantrums when things didn't go her way. She was a woman, and it was time to face the truth of her own choices. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly, the words tasting foreign in her mouth. "Maybe it's time for me to move on." Her father nodded, but there was a glint of something in his eyes, a mixture of sadness and relief. It was as if he, too, had been waiting for this moment, for Stella to finally understand that there was no going back, that she had to face the consequences of her actions, and find a way to move forward. And so, for the first time in years, Stella took a deep breath, looking out the window toward the village beyond. The world was still out there, waiting for her. It was time to take the first step into the future, no more lies, no more expectations. Just herself. Years had passed since the day Janet and Victor had faced their truth, and their lives had blossomed in ways neither of them could have imagined. Together, they had built a life rooted in love, honesty, and mutual respect. The mansion, once a symbol of deceit and confusion, had become their home, a place where they could be themselves without fear, without lies. Janet and Victor now had 2 children, a boy and a girl, whose laughter filled the halls of the grand house. Their son, Adamu, was a bright-eyed, curious 6-year-old, always asking questions and full of energy. His sister, Ifema, was 4, sweet and gentle, her eyes sparkling with mischief. The 2 children, so full of life, had brought warmth and joy into the home, reminding Janet and Victor every day of the love they had fought for. Victor, though blind, had never been an absent father. He had learned to guide his children through the world with the help of his senses, his heart, and his deep understanding of what truly mattered. His bond with Adamu and Ifema was unshakable. Every evening, he would sit with them, telling stories of his youth, stories that didn't require sight but only the power of imagination. Janet, ever the artist, would paint vibrant pictures of the world for them, creating memories that would last a lifetime. The family spent their days exploring the vast garden, with Victor leading the way and Janet guiding them through the beauty of their surroundings. They planted flowers together, watched the sun set over the horizon, and laughed under the twinkling stars. The days felt long, but in the best way, full of joy, purpose, and the warmth of love. The house, which once felt like a gilded cage to Janet, had transformed into a sanctuary. Every room, every corner was a testament to their journey, filled with moments of laughter, love, and the echoes of their children's footsteps. Janet and Victor were partners in every sense, equal in their devotion to their family and to each other. It had not always been easy, but the love they had for one another had grown stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Janet sat in the living room, Adamu and Ifema curled up beside her, listening intently as she read a story. Victor sat nearby, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a soft smile on his face as he listened. There was peace in this moment, something that had once felt impossible. Adamu tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice eager. "Mama, tell us more about how you and Papa met." His eyes were wide with curiosity, clearly fascinated by the tale of how his parents' love had blossomed against all odds. Janet smiled and began to speak, her voice filled with warmth as she told the story of how they had met, how the truth had brought them together, and how, despite the struggles, they had found a love deeper than anything they had ever imagined. She spoke of their marriage, of how she had come to realize that she wasn't just someone's substitute, she was loved, she was seen, and she had chosen Victor because of the person he was, not because of the circumstances that had brought them together. Victor, listening beside them, added with a quiet chuckle, "I always knew she was the one. Even without sight, I could feel it. My heart knew." The children's laughter filled the air as they sat in the warmth of the family circle, completely content in the love that enveloped them. The house was alive with joy, and in the distance, the sound of birds singing filled the air, a reminder of the beauty that had flourished in their lives. Janet and Victor had found something far more precious than wealth or status. They had found a family, a bond that could not be broken, no matter the challenges life had thrown at them. Together, they had built a life of happiness, one rooted in the love they had always deserved. And as the years passed, the family continued to grow, not just in size, but in strength, in love, and in the unwavering belief that truth, kindness, and the ability to love without conditions could create the most beautiful life imaginable.